The epistle reading is taken from Romans chapter 12, beginning the 9th verse, as printed in your bulletin. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink, for by doing this you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So Renee read the entire version of The Burning Bush, which is fantastic, I think. This story of the burning bush has got to be one of the 10 best known stories in the Bible, right? You've seen it at some point. Sadly, we know the story mostly from Hollywood. We know how Hollywood has told the story rather than the written word. Disney and Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments define in most people's mind the visual image of the event. Moses is Charlton Heston. He is. You know, later on in the movie, a bald Yul Brynner is Pharaoh. Yvonne DiCarlo plays an Egyptian princess / seductress who isn't really in the Bible, but who cares? And then my favorite character, Aaron, Moses' brother, who helps deliver the message to Pharaoh. He is played by the gangster movie star Edward G. Robinson. Now, as much as we know this movie, it only won one Academy Award. And that was for special effects. Who here, whether you've seen it or not, has not seen the parting of the Red Sea? Now, how they would make that movie today, no telling how. There would be enormous special effects used. In the Ten Commandments by Cecil B. DeMille, it was done with Jell-O. The scene of the burning bush was actually first shot in the Sinai desert. However, the part is supposed to be played by Moses with some humility, and Charlton Heston couldn't quite get that, so they had to reshoot it in Hollywood, and he still didn't really get it. But I think this is pretty cool. God's voice coming out of the burning bush, that was actually Charlton Heston's voice, just slowed down. But really, the movie doesn't convey what Renee just read, does it? Not really. Not the intent. So the story is that Moses had fled Egypt because he had killed an Egyptian who was wrongly beating a Jewish slave. He had gotten married. He had a son. He was living in Midian. He had been there for quite a while. He was happy. He was now content being a shepherd. He's then one day out walking, doing his thing, and he sees a burning bush. And he turns toward the bush. I think I would have turned. I think I would have turned. I think I would have. Maybe I would have walked on. I don't know. I hope I would have turned. What would you have done? And then, this story that is called the burning bush, but since I was a kid, I have thought it should have been called the talking bush. I mean, that's what's unusual, right? God speaks to Moses and calls him by name. And Moses responds as Abraham did 800 years before. Here am I. He is told to take off his shoes because he is now standing on holy ground. Really, Moses must have walked here thousands of times before. This was common ground. When did it become holy ground? When God tells him to go to Pharaoh and to lead the Jews from bondage to freedom, Moses has second thoughts. He questions if God has the right mind. Is Moses the right man? He points out that he stutters, something that Charlton Heston doesn't do in the movie. He asks him to pick someone else. Really, a better person to play the part of Moses in the movie surely would have been Woody Allen. Or maybe Ben Stiller. Then Moses probably rightly asked, okay, if I do what you ask of me, who am I to say sent me? And God responds with the name translated in the New Revised Standard Version, I am who I am, which is in Hebrew Yahweh. So humor me with this, please. Humor me. I need you to take the golf pencil that's right in front of you that you've always wondered, what is this for? This is what it's for. Take that pencil out, get a piece of paper, write on the back of this, I don't care. I want you to write on the paper 4 letters. J, as in James. H, as in Harvey. V, as in victory. And another H, as in Henry. J-H-V-H. By some spellings, that is the word Yahweh. But you say, there are no vowels. There are no vowels because in Hebrew, there are no vowels. So, after J, put in an E. After H, write down an O. After V, pencil in an A. This is how the Greek language added vowels to the Hebrew word. What word did you get? Jehovah. And in 1611, the King James Version of the Bible, every time the word Yahweh appears, and is used for God, it's translated Jehovah. The denomination Jehovah's Witnesses are a witness to this God. But you might say the Hebrew pronunciation of the word is Yahweh. No matter how you cut it, though, that this use for the name of God, Yahweh, appears in the Bible 6,800 times. It would appear that you are supposed to know the name of God. Now, until 150 years ago, thankfully through archaeology and biblical studies, no one knew how Yahweh was pronounced. Remember, there are no vowels. In Judaism, you're never supposed to say the name of God. Right? You've seen that? G-D. I mean, you're never supposed to say the name of God. So, if you're a Jew, historically, when you came upon the word Yahweh in the Bible, you would substitute Adonai. That would be the Hebrew. In Greek, it became Kyrios. And in English, that got translated Lord. So in the Old Testament, every time you see the word Lord, the Hebrew word is Yahweh. I am who I am. So where does the word God come from? If you write down E-L, E-L, as in Baal. Pagan gods who stood opposed to Yahweh. That's where we get the word God when it gets to English. So when you swear, what word do you use? If you hit your thumb with a hammer, you might say, God. You might. But you don't invoke Yahweh or Jehovah or the Lord. You curse using the pagan name for God. Yahweh is translated in our Pew Bible, I am who I am. It can also be translated, I will be what I will be, or I will be who I am, or I am what I will be. However you parse it, the name of God is a verb that implies existence, presence now, and into tomorrow. In the Gospel of John, Jesus is the great I am. Always present, always with us, today, tomorrow. And it would seem that by knowing God's name, we begin to know what God expects of us. Now, Moses could have walked past the burning bush, but he turned toward it. He turned, and God called him by name, Moses, Moses. Would God have found a way to call him if he had not turned? Look, I know what you're thinking. God has never called me out of a burning bush. But I would disagree. This was just an ordinary day for Moses. He didn't have to go to the edge of the Grand Canyon to hear God's call. This was an ordinary bush just yesterday. What is now holy ground was common ground the day before. And I think that God calls us all like that, if we choose to listen. So I am glad that the Sheehans are not here today, that they're in Cincinnati for the weekend, because I intend to use them as an example. So Anthony was a big dog in England in healthcare. I'm serious, big dog. On a chance meeting, he and I got to know each other in Boston, and I invited him to come to Memphis, and he came. While here, a couple of years ago now, I talked to him about the idea of being called by God for the work of caring for the health of the poor in this city. He listened, and then he and Andrea, along with their girls, moved over 4,000 miles from their home in the Midlands to Memphis. They left a much better paying job. They left a place where interracial marriages are readily accepted. And they came because they saw something more powerful for their lives here. And he would tell you that he is still working on the idea of calling. This point about God being with you on the journey. He is on the journey. But what they quickly came to realize, and I hope you do too, they could not do it on their own. And so, they became Methodist. John Wesley and his partner, George Whitefield, used to argue that Moses' response to the burning bush proved that, to quote Whitefield, Moses was a fine Methodist, and a good one at that. Their point was that the core of being a Methodist is to listen closely to what God calls us to do and to act for those whom the halls of power have pressed down, which is exactly what Moses did. But I also believe that Anthony and Andrea see that listening to God requires a community of sojourners walking together on the path of liberation. In Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he is clear that the way to follow Jesus is through the practice of love. He is emphatic. Make love your aim. But how do I do that? When you read Paul, you realize that he has a cantankerous side. If left to himself, he would eagerly be the one to pour red-hot coals over the heads of anyone who was his enemy. You can see it in the passage we just read a few minutes ago. But if you choose to follow Jesus, if you have listened to I Am's message about love, then you know that vengeance belongs only to God. And the way love requires walking hand in glove along the path is what he describes in Romans in this passage we've read today. Listen one more time. How do I live my life? How do I embrace love? Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. So whether God speaks directly to you through a burning bush doesn't really matter, does it? What we know is that Yahweh's presence with us still burns today, and that the life forged in love makes each of us fully alive. Every day you hear that, and every day you take it to heart, you might just take off your shoes, because you will be standing on holy ground. Amen.